Hi, I'm Patrick Giguere with Cosmic Alchemist Astrology, and thanks for tuning in. So, we're here with another exciting episode. I've got my friend Terrence Walker with me. He's going to share some really cool stuff. We're going to get into some, mysterious geography. So, some maps, some like pre 1700s maps that just look really different.
Hmm.
And they have things on them that are not on modern maps. We'll get into some so-called alternative history too. We would consider genuine history, or at least we're on a trail of it anyway.
Right.
Well, thanks, Terrence.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for coming.
Yeah. As always, always looking forward to our conversations. This one here, we'll see how, what comes out of the bag on this one. But, interesting enough, with a lot of the things that are going on in the day to day that are shifting. One of the ones that's been most interesting is the things that have been going on with the with aviation and how we see all these strikes and people can't get their bags when they're flying, and these connector flights are just like situations out of hell, getting stuck in other destinations and things like that. It kind of seems like another part of the system breaking that, the elite or the powers that be
Mm.
are trying to continue to like hold on or regulate or keep hidden mysteries about for various reasons. Um, what's interesting to me is, you know, um, when I saw, okay, a few months back, probably the beginning of this year, took a flight from Amsterdam to DC. And usually that flight, it's about a 9 hour flight or whatever. Um, but I'm one of these people, like, I want to see things for myself, but for the most part, it's kind of hard to see things on a plane or whatever. But luckily, this particular flight, they flew over Greenland, or what I think is Greenland anyway,
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so and because usually they don't usually take that flight pattern, so we leave, go across North Sea, go across Ireland, and they're kind of like going up, you know what I mean? And one of the things I remember just looking at was like, it's like, damn, look at all this. Like, I mean, it's like barren out here. It's just like nothing but ice,
Mm.
so that really triggered my brain waves. Like, yo, like, do we really know where things are? That whole spill. Because like when we look at the map, let's say like Russia's over here, but then Russia also connects to, well, it's like a ice bridge for or near Alaska, in Alaska, where that freezes, that allows people to walk over to Russia.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so okay. So are you telling me that Russia just wraps around the whole top from what we're looking at? Okay, so that's kind of one of those simple things. But then even people who I know who take flights from Europe to go to the Southern Hemisphere, to Indonesia, Australia, they tell you that they fly over Russia first and then go down. And I'm like, yo, these are some weird flight patterns. You would kind of think that they would fly south, you know what I mean? For whatever reasons, they have their
Mm.
ways about taking these funky flight patterns, and then you can't get a direct flight to certain places. It's like you have to fly to one destination and you stay there for a day or two or a couple hours, and then that flight takes you somewhere else, and then you end up at your destination.
Yeah.
So so looking at some of these maps, uh it's kind of was like, well, a lot more has happened than we've been educated on, far as like land masses, and I'm not too sure that we even really know where we actually are located on the map, you know. So that's kind of like really intriguing to me. Especially the chart we were kind of looking at previous about the timelines, and it was like talking about things prior to 1812.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
then
that's a key date where it seems like things really, there was like a whole flip, a script flip.
definitely. Along with the maps, what did you have? You have the 1812 dictionary, I believe. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so it's
Right.
like things are very different as far as like, the way they're defined in that dictionary. And then after that time period, you know, whether it's regions or a group of people are identified differently prior to 1812
Mm.
and after. You never really hear anything about the mud floods ever. I mean, it was a huge event, right?
Yeah.
They drill us on the freaking dinosaurs getting hit, you know, by ice, but
Yeah.
something as recent as like a couple 100 years ago, you know, like you would think would be very significant that they would educate you on this, and it's kind of like mom's the word completely, you know, on that whole thing. So yeah, so that kind of has me like really intrigued as to you know, get a greater sense of like where we are and what's happened, you know. Now there's tons of information, you know, that a lot of it makes sense, some of it contradicts itself, and we know that the truth is somewhere in the midst of it. You know, especially when we start talking about some of these underwater cities, these cities that are underwater. Some of these earthquakes that they've kind of like just haven't mentioned at all, which kind of reshaped the you know, large land masses, especially down towards South America and that piece that connects to Antarctica, and then Australia. I think like a week ago I was looking at something called Terra Fuego, which
Oh
on
yeah.
the regular map, you know, it just shows you like this little region in South America. But the map that I saw, it was this large landmass that they said that Australia was actually connected to. And I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense, you know. Australia, and I'm going to assume Indonesia as well, because this surfing a wave found something on this. Let me see if I can find it. Maybe I took a screenshot of it about this Javanese Australian queen that they call king. And I was like, but that's like in South America, though. Like in Australia, from what I was taught, it's way on the other side of the world, you know, which kind of like really blew my mind. Let me see if I can't get the name for you real quick.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm kind of wrestling with the damn sharing feature on Zoom here. I'm trying to get it so you can just pull stuff up on screen. I
Okay,
don't know if
not a
the hell
problem.
I'm
Not a
doing here.
problem. We're working through it. Yeah, Zoom, the collective consciousness, everything's like anarchy right now. So, you know, we're gonna bring some order to the chaos.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, Australian, Javanese king. Oh, it was a king. See if I can't send this to you. Um, bang. Yeah, so yeah, it was interesting things like that that just kind of like just blew me away. I'm like, yo, I really don't know anything. I really don't know anything at this point. I feel like I
Yeah.
have to just re-educate myself on geography as a whole. And then on top, and then also, I feel like they don't want us to see some of the things that we already starting to see in the sky, as far as like the extraterrestrial type activity that they finally came forth to make mention of,
Oh
things
yeah.
like that, So, that's another interesting thing. I on a flight to Europe one time, you know, usually when you're leaving the US airspace, you got drones and things that are kind of like going up and down the coast, kind of like just
Mm,
checking out what's crossing over into like US airspace or leaving it or whatever.
yeah.
Well, I mean, we were about to cross the Atlantic, so we're already at top speed as far as like the plane is concerned, and at a very high altitude. And out of nowhere, I- maybe it was drone, I don't know, but for something to like catch up with a plane, like it's nothing. This thing came out of nowhere, and it kind of just caught up with the plane, scanned it, and then took off again. And I was
Wow.
like, yo, I was like, yo, that's a drone. What kind of speed is it moving at? Because it pulled up on the plane like the plane was just standing still,
Yeah.
and went forward and went back, went around it one time, and then kind of just like stayed there and then took off again. And I was like, okay, so maybe this happens a lot more often. And then you hear people who fly often, or some of the pilots, or some of the guys like in the Navy or whatever, that talk about a lot of the stuff that they've seen happening you know out on the open seas, or taking
Yeah.
these dives into the water. Let's see here. Okay, got
Yeah.
it. I'm sending this here to you. Okay. No, it doesn't want to do it. Don't worry, my stuff is not really cooperating either, but yeah, it's just one of those days. It's all good. Boom. Um, boom. Yeah, that's weird. Like it doesn't even want to like pull up your email address, but that's okay. I'll figure it out in a bit. But yeah, so as far as let's see here. Now I can't even pull up the image. Like that is wow. Okay.
Yeah. Well, this technology is kind of getting, it seems like it's getting less efficient, like day by
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you know how, like at the supermarkets, when you go to pay with a card, how I think it's all the same system because it's always the same voice.
mm,
You
mm-hmm,
know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
Like the automated, like woman's voice.
Yeah.
Um, those things used to be like lightning fast, or like the self checkouts. And now it's like you got to twiddle your thumbs and like wait for the thing to,
To figure it out.
yeah. And it's like, 10 years ago, they were faster.
Yeah. I wonder if uh man, my brain just went like really quickly, like almost like it's about to have another upgrade in itself as well. Like, like the collective consciousness is in one space of like transition. Maybe AI and technology is kind of like in that same space of like where, there's a interruption in the total frequency of things, you know what I mean, as it kind of like pushes into this next space.
Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah, I mean, and then honestly, like now that we are really moving into this digital space and more things are becoming more electric, and they're trying to transfer things into the metasphere, I'm wondering if some of the technology like is becoming so advanced that these systems that they're using becoming like obsolete where it can't function in it anymore.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Like they just want to keep us stuck in the 70s, but they want to keep building
Yeah,
with controlling everything. And then yeah, they can't talk anymore.
exactly. It's like
Like,
almost like trying to use Linux and MS-DOS, like
so they're gonna have to throw us a bone eventually.
exactly. They're gonna have to. Like they're gonna have to. Um, or is this gonna break completely? So
Yeah,
one of the two, like give a little bit, or is this gonna break? Uh,
yeah, yeah. Well, that's interesting because it's like just things breaking. It's like, well, it's happened before, and
maybe I can't
especially,
send things to you because I'm sending it to the wrong email address. That might be part of the problem. So let me try to send it to the right email. Uh, okay, bet. There we go. Okay, so just sent that one there. And
let's see. I'll give it a minute. You got info at the Cosmic Alchemist?
yes, yep,
Oh,
that's what I'm sending. I was trying to send it to your name, and that was not the right email address.
oh yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, let me let's see. I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna download it. I'm gonna pull it up. Sweet. Oh, wait. Oh, I know what I have to do.
Yeah, so while you're doing that, I'll just kind of talk a little bit. So
Yeah.
this Australian Japanese king. Oh, there we go. Well, I don't know if we can. Yeah, okay, good. So I was watching this other YouTuber or whatever, and this is one of the things that came out of it, like this piece here about this Australian Japanese king. And what this really made me think of was all of the South Pacific islands, more or less, like Hawaii. And some of those islands out there too, at maybe, because all of them have volcanoes on them, you know what I mean? All of these islands have like these huge volcanoes on them. And prior to the 1500s, maybe they were more intact as well too, you know what I'm saying? Before they kind of like went adrift, you know what I'm saying, became their own island chain,
Yeah.
because when I look at some of the like a lot of the culture, within it's kind of the same to some degree, you know what I mean? Of course, over time, things have changed here and there, but I saw a lot of like similarities. And one of the things that this YouTuber from that particular channel was talking about was the three Indies, or like the three Indias,
So was that like Sumatra, Java, and like Borneo or something? Or
so much, yeah, that. And then but he had a completely different take on it. He was coming from well, in that particular episode, he was just talking about the connection between Antarctica and South America,
huh?
and
Yeah.
how Antarctica wasn't always under ice. That's
Sure.
something that happened fairly recent. And it was like, he was just kind of giving context to how there was this pristine rainforest that sat right beneath the ice,
Yeah.
and a lot of these islands have like this paradise type feel, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, but yeah, even though it says Australia Javanese, he was talking about South America, and like he made reference to uh
Yeah.
Terra Fuego. I
Have
was
you
like,
heard
wow,
of Kon-Tiki?
Contigi. No, I haven't. I have
So
not.
there was a actually let me show you this. So there was a Norwegian um explorer named Thor Heyerdahl.
Uh-huh.
And what he did was, it was this probably like 1946, 1947.
Mm-hmm.
Oh Christ, they named a watch after it. I do an image search and I get a damn Tag Heuer watch or whatever. So yeah, Thor Heyerdahl was this explorer. He was like an anthropologist. And I think in the 30s, he had been he'd been like studying in Polynesia.
Mm.
And he was convinced that there was that people from South America had colonized Polynesia.
Mm. Mm.
Because
Okay.
all the books used to say they came from Southeast Asia, but basically with the currents, you'd be like paddling an outrigger against the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
But the currents from South America
Uh-huh. They
go
flow.
to Polynesia, like it's like counterclockwise across the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
So he was trying to get all kinds of people to fund it. He went to like the national, what the like the Explorers Club and National Geographic, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you're a dumbass."
Right.
So then he went he went to Peru. And what the hell was it? I think he may have gone to the presidential palace and he got like an audience. I think he was with like the president or the prime minister, and he said, "How would you feel if I could prove that Peruvians," he used the concept of this modern,
Yeah.
country, but he said, "How would you feel if I could prove that Peruvians colonized Polynesia?" And I guess the guy was like, "Well, and he showed him the evidence and he goes, "That's fascinating." So he gave him some money, and then that guy, I guess there was like a Navy base, US Navy in Lima back in the day. So then he called
Okay.
the Navy and he was like, "Give this guy whatever he needs."
Wow.
So he built
Wow.
a raft out of balsa wood logs.
Wow.
And the whole thing was the idea was just to drift with the currents. The guys that went with him, it was a bunch of Norwegians and like one Swede, and they thought they were going to die, but it took like 4 months and they reached Polynesia. So this was like, it's like a depiction. I think this is a painting. It's a depiction of the raft.
Wow.
So
That's serious.
they built like a shack on it and they slept in the shack.
And they went for it. They just went for it. It was like,
Mhm.
look, this is the flow here. And
Yeah.
I mean, so to this whole point as well, like, like as far as the waterways and those patterns or whatever, the other thing that makes sense to me is that a lot of these people were like master astrologers, especially ones that were out on the water,
Yeah.
so they would know how how to navigate, what I'm saying, from one region to the next by watching what was happening in the stars.
Yeah.
There was something else that kind of came to mind, was like, okay, as far as like, well, if that's the case, then it triggered a lot of things within me, as far as like the shape of the earth. You know what I mean? I'm not going to go into the whole flat versus round thing or whatever,
Sure.
which in my personal opinion, I don't think is either,
Me neither.
yeah.
Me neither. They're polar opposites and you
Yeah,
can't.
exactly.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think it's either. It's somewhere in the middle, in between there. But then if that's the case, then that means, I mean, it took me into a little bit of physics as well. What is gravity? You know what I mean? Which a lot of times well, from what I've seen, quantum physics, they're saying that it has a lot more to do with hydrogen, and density, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so that kind of made more sense to me as well. And like, we were just kind of talking about, like, we were mentioning like CERN, I was like, okay, well, what kind of particles are they slamming together? You know what I mean? What kind of collider is it? You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, there's so much that we haven't been taught. But then the people that I feel like are in control right now, I think they were just in the best position after one of these cataclysmic events that happened to be able to say, okay, this is how everything is working. This is where it comes from. And they just took fragments from, very rich history that they knew very little about, but they knew enough about to be able to like construct their own stories, their own history, from these things.
Mm.
And that was kind of like I'm not sure if the other this channel is very interesting. They talk about a lot of deep stuff. This 432 to drop. I just started checking it out. Like they have tons of stuff on there, and they go completely against the grain of like mainstream history and things like that. They operate primarily from a very indigenous space, and they talk about more or less the indigenous space across the globe from um, India Superior, which was this landmass here, to Jerusalem. I mean, they get into some very heavy stuff,
Mm.
So something that I've just been checking out, even talked a little bit about, from what I saw, they talked about the not religious, the tribal wars, the wars that the federations were fighting against, like the Moorish domains that were trying to come in and take their sacred lands that were operating with a lot of the Europeans and that whole P2 Mason piece as well. So I kind of got entrenched in a lot of what they were talking about and what they were saying.
Yeah.
Very in depth. I think they have their own like library or archive of like, um, you know, facts, what I'm saying, that they can trace from like credible sources. So just something to check out
Yeah.
whenever you get a chance. But on the other map or on the other screenshot I was showing you on that timeline, I think that was kind of like the turning point at that late 1700s going into the early 1800s or whatever,
Mm.
which kind of makes sense to me, even with like we were talking about before with Pluto's return in the Americas.
Right.
And a lot of these things that were hidden are going to be revealed. I think that's what we're actually starting to step into, because I found all this stuff about, like, I believe it was called, I wrote it down somewhere, I'm not sure where I wrote it down, but like the Chickamauga Wars.
All right. Yeah.
And they were talking about how they got into this whole thing about like slavery. They was like, okay, slavery happened. There was a time period where there were individuals being brought from the west coast of Africa to like the Western Hemisphere. But, they got more into the fact that the copper colored person of America was already here. Like they always been here, and
Yeah.
they were more or less prisoners of war, so which kind of made more sense to me. If you lose a war, that you
Huh.
could be enslaved by the people who won the war versus
So the people being transported across the Atlantic were the prisoners of war, or the people
no, the people that were already here
already
were,
here?
yeah.
Who's holding them prisoner?
The Europeans that had came here. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah, the
I got
Europeans that
yeah.
had came here. Because like,
Okay.
man, I'll try to define this as well, because I started digging into some of the stuff and I started looking at the National Archives,
Yeah.
and it looked like in the 1600s, when there was a lot of activity across the Atlantic, because slavery and indentured servants was like a huge business.
Yeah.
It's records of it. and there were tons of people that were being taken from the Americas back to Europe.
Yeah, you've told me about this before, and I don't know much about this. So
Yeah,
please.
yeah. So maybe I'll try to pull that up as well. So I dig into my archive, some of the stuff that I got out of the National Archive, and it made
Yeah,
sense to me because it was a business. So,
yeah,
most businesses, they keep record of everything, and in these records, uh, there were a lot of people that were being taken from America and being sent back to Europe. And I
yeah,
vaguely remembered part of this being, I don't remember the real name, so don't hold me. I have it for you the next time. But the Disney story, Pocahontas, had a lot of real relevance to it, where they took her back to Europe.
yeah,
And when I read the story the first time, what it really reminded me of was like how bureaucracy and like the aristocrats kind of like came about, when they were trying to establish themselves. Because like the thing that they would do is like, we see how the elites are very keen on bloodlines and keeping their bloodlines a certain way. So marrying into certain families and things like that,
yeah,
that was like their game, even in the Ottoman Empire, to like, all right, we're going to marry into this family, which is going to give us this kind of power, you know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
it kind of made sense to me as to like, oh, how this small country has so much influence over so
yeah,
many regions of the world, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like they went in right at the top, so
So, do you think like Pocahontas was like a royal hostage to like
I believe so.
keep the
I believe
people in Virginia from getting, too out of hand?
I think so. I believe
Yeah,
so. I mean, from the story that I read, that's exactly what it sounded like. You know what I mean?
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, one of the things to me is like, so we've talked about this in other shows, but if someone's just picking it up. So Terrence and I have been discussing that like people of every kind of complexion and makeup were in the Americas like when Columbus got here. So with that said, like I think the Europeans, like the European elites had like I think there was like a special hatred for like the fellow Europeans who were like living over here, like
hmm
not under
hmm
people Christianity and not under European,
hmm
because it's like that's a thing. Shit went real bad, like in Massachusetts, like in the old days where I grew up. Like
yeah,
the Pilgrims came over, and like the chief who was like kind of the head of the whole area. His name was Massasoit. That's who
hmm
Massachusetts is named after.
hmm
They made a treaty. The Pilgrims were like, "Yeah, we're good." Then you had the Puritans coming in, like who were just total. Like they were like, it's like the fundamentalist Christians who were like all happy when we invaded Iraq because it's like, oh, we're gonna go kill non-believers. Like Puritans were like that, so they came to Boston and they decided they needed more land. So they basically got like the most despicable pilgrims and they teamed up with them and they started trying
yeah,
to take land. So they had a whole war. Um,
yeah,
I think those coastal people, like in New England, I think they were pretty European looking. Like I think you had to go into the inland.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I think there was like a real. They were like,
yeah. And I
we're
think,
gonna
and I
get
like, I
you.
think the grimy was gramming out each other. I think they were gramming each other out. Like it's like, okay, it kind of like, because like the whole thing of taxes, right? You
Yeah,
know, it's like, okay, all right, yeah, sure, I'll pay you taxes. You know what I mean? I don't want to be here, or whatever the case may be. Like getting funded for certain things, but then when those parties teamed up with other you know groups of people that had foul intentions of stealing, they kind of got together
yeah,
and for a common cause decided that they want to still from indigenous people, but they're still doing it today. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When they find like gold or oil or
Yeah.
any of these kind of things, and so-called third world countries that are like rich with minerals or things like that,
Yeah.
they find a way to just take it. You know what I'm saying? So, I'm
Totally.
not like, so why would the formula ever change now? So, and then I think, once the grimy got access to the resources that they wanted, they grimed out their own brothers. You know what I mean? It's just like, well,
Totally.
yeah, I'm not giving you anything.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like that, like that's part of like the way it seems like a lot of things have happened, especially here in America, where everybody's trying to claim territory that isn't really theirs,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but the ones that are in charge or were in charge for a long time, I think they had to jump. They knew a little bit more. And they were kind of like put in position to when I say put in position, meaning like things lined up for them to do atrocious things. And a part of that, I believe, has to do with these cataclysmic events, these floods and earthquakes and things like that. You
Yeah.
know, and the use of like gunpowder,
Yeah.
and things like that. Now, I mean, I can go a bunch of different ways with it, but just kind of to stand there. Okay, then it makes sense. When you're dealing with people who, when you make an agreement, and usually when you make an agreement, you honor your agreement, you know what I mean? Being an upright, individual, they think you're going to uphold it. And then you're dealing with someone who's telling you something like, yeah, like I'll make this agreement with you, and then stab you in the back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a whole different level of just like inhumane, activity that I think that a lot of the people were not used to, because, a lot of times when I look at indigenous people, especially, I mean, across the world, yeah, they have their disagreements, yeah, they have wars or whatever, but they still kind of like follow a code. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 To me, just because, I focus a lot on European stuff, and it's like, to me, it's like what you're saying. It's like Vikings versus
Yeah.
Christian empires.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the Vikings are like, yeah, we're gonna do a little raiding, but we're gonna be gone soon, and.
Right.
But the
And because they
Christian,
had a code, you know?
yeah,
Like, if Odin told them, like, all right, this is what we're doing, they're rolling with the gods, but
yeah,
with, I don't know, with the Christians, they use religion, but man, like they
oh,
didn't
yeah,
really follow through on like a lot of what they say they were going to do. They were kind of like hiding behind these religious beliefs, but had this like real foul intent. And I think that was a real shock for a lot of people.
it's like they couldn't believe it. It's like how, I don't know. I mean, it's like, it's weird. Like, I think there are a lot of nice people in America, but then
Yeah,
there are a lot of people in America who say they're nice, but they're just
absolutely.
fucking assholes. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
it's like, yeah,
Absolutely.
those Christian kingdoms were doing that. They're like, well, we're followers of Christ, and so yeah, we're cool, and you're a non-believer.
So we got to convert
Shit.
you,
Yeah.
like my belief says that it's okay to bring you harm because you don't believe the same way I believe.
Yeah. Did you ever
Yeah.
hear like, so mainstream history doesn't talk about this, but I found this kind of a guy who's sort of my teacher. He's taught me like qigong and like
Yeah.
astrology and a bunch of stuff. He turned me on to this. He kind of connected these events, and I was like, oh yeah. So basically, it looks like Charlemagne basically started the Viking raids into
Ah.
like Western Europe, because his so Charlemagne was a Frank. It's this tribe, this like Germanic tribe that
Mm-hmm.
France is named after. So they
Mm-hmm.
were indigenous Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
they moved into the area of France, and then basically the Pope had like an open offer, and he was like, any king who can put the Roman Empire back together for me,
Right.
I'll let you do whatever the fuck you want.
Right. Right. Right.
And you'll have a get out of hell free card. I'll make money available to you. So I think it was Charlemagne's grandfather, it was maybe like Pepin or somebody. He took the offer up, and he was like, so they went from being like, basically Norse pagans to like, oh, okay, we're Christians now.
Ah.
So they're like, okay, well, okay, Holy Father, we'll assemble your Roman Empire for you. And then, because the Pope's the emperor, but he didn't have any teeth. He needed
He needed teeth.
some muscle.
Exactly. And
so then you get to Charlemagne, and so he knew all the customs of these, like, these Germanic people. So they used to have their councils were called things. When they had a thing, it was forbidden to bring weapons.
Okay.
You had to come unarmed. So he was fighting his Saxon wars, kind of in like, Northwest Germany, getting into Germany. And he called one of these things, and it's like 4,000 leaders showed up for this thing, about 4,500 of them. So they show up unarmed, as the age-old, tradition. He had it surrounded with his troops, so then he just encircled them and tried to kill them all.
Yeah.
So a bunch of them escaped, and the idea is that they went north. They went to Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and they were like,
gotta watch out for
that pedophile Pope in Rome, that wannabe emperor. He's got some new muscle, and they're coming for all of us. So in 7 years, you get the indigenous Europeans attacking this whole Christian empire, and they go right for the churches every time.
Every time.
And and then the really the left-wing academics who they love to play the wimpy card, because when you act like a wimp, you can get away with whatever the fuck you want.
Right.
So they're like, oh, those nasty Vikings went for the poor church people, and it's like, yeah, it's because they were organizing
raids.
A genocide and a takeover, and they were like planning to erase cultures.
Yeah, exactly. And I think so I have something on that as well, because we were kind of like talking about like some of the stuff out of Spain a little while back. But I know one of the popes, Pope Innocent, is it the Pope Innocent the fourth, the seventh? I can't remember, one of them, but it was not the first, but it was like Pope Innocent seventh, eighth, one of them. He declared war on all indigenous people around the world.
That was like 1490 or whatever.
Yeah. This is right before these Christian missions, what I'm saying, across the Atlantic. So they had already begin, some of this trickology and some of the things that they were using, on that side. That's the one thing I can say, man. They're thorough in their craft. Like they don't just like willy-nilly come at something. When they're coming for you, they're coming for you. And I think that's where it started. And like you said, for a long time they didn't have teeth. So they entice some of the more stronger groups to be like, hey, I'll give you this for this, you know what I mean? Which is a whole different setup, for us, like, with the indigenous people, whatever, because it's like once you make an agreement, pretty much we've agreed on this, you follow through on it, you know what I mean? And like I've seen this also with like people that I've gotten to get to know, that first, second generations of people who moved to, the Western world, let's just say it like that, not so much America, mostly America, but just in the Western world, they don't get it. Like sarcasm, they don't get it. They don't understand. It's like, yo, you told me I had to do this, this, and this. so that I can be straight. But now you're telling me I got to have X, Y, and Z as well. So it's so
Yeah.
ingrained into, our culture here where we're like, yeah, like when someone tells us something, we're like, uh, yeah, we take it with a grain of salt. You know what I mean? Like, and kind of we have this other radar where we like fishing through the smell for the BS and what
Yeah.
we're being told. You know what I mean? Versus in other places, you agree on it, and that's pretty much what it is supposed to be. And like you see, like in a lot of these places, you might say, well, we might say that they have less, but they have peace. You know what I mean? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm happy they're not convoluted with all these other like thoughts or whatever. You know what I'm saying? They live a very
Yeah.
great life.
They don't have rich people problems.
Exactly.
It's like,
Exactly.
to me, like American dream was always like, oh, well, you're not gonna make much money, but you'll have rich people problems. You're
Yeah.
gonna start like
Yeah.
you're gonna get all full of yourself and start using words like legacy and
Yeah. Yeah.
you know
Exactly. Exactly.
how other people think your family looks. And yeah, it's interesting to me. It's like, again, through my lens, through European American type, it's like, so for me, it's like I was basically brought up to be a good tribal European. It's like, be a good Irish person, be a good French person. Like those are the values I was brought up with. Be honest, be hardworking.
Mm-hmm.
Don't pull a wool over people's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, when you get to a certain strata in society,
Yeah.
they're a bunch of Romans.
Yeah.
So that's like the indigenous and, like, I don't know
Yep.
what the fuck you
Yep.
call it, imperial disconnect.
Yep.
So it's like, for them, it's like they kind of, like, a lot of them don't have any real friends. And it's like, if there's an advantage and they gotta, like, kind of screw someone, they're gonna do it. And it's like,
Better believe it.
and with the Romans, it was like that. It's like lying. It was like, well, that was just good politics.
True.
Because you got ahead, you made some money. So it's like,
Yeah. And it's the same today. Like politics, like it's the
yeah,
same thing, like
yeah,
people tell you not to trust a politician, like,
yeah. So it's like
yeah,
our families are still raising us to be like good indigenous people, but they don't understand we're dealing with fucking Romans.
exactly.
You're being ruled
Exactly.
by Romans.
Exactly. And I think that's a bigger point there. Like I think most people, are good people. They
Yeah,
want, we all want the same thing. We want to be okay, we want our families to be okay, we help when we can, but then been influenced by uh the elite or whatever you want to call them, you know what I mean? And I say elite, I just mean just like that, those that are in a position to oppress other people.
yeah.
you know?
People with something to big something to gain.
Yeah. Because like, even with like what I was saying, a lot of people I've gotten to getting to know them from other places, when they come to America, you know, yeah, they might, it's a lot of things that just don't make sense or whatever. But then also they see that the people aren't exactly like the people that they see on TV, like just comp as ass. I mean, it's assholes everywhere. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, we know that, but you kind of see that, for the most part, people are fairly genuine. They're good people because most of everybody that is in America, they have ties to somewhere else or something, you know what I mean? Like to some degree, like so in that sense, that's what I think makes America great, because we're all different, but we kind of like can operate on the same accord. But then
yeah,
the structure of like the government construct which we're under is tyranny, in a lot of ways, just
oh,
like,
yeah,
where we don't want to be associated with that. Well, some do, the ones that are bought into the system, but
yeah. People
it's,
full of fear they don't want to make a decision
yeah,
on their own.
exactly.
Yeah,
People full of fear. So that's a great way to kind of like to put that. And I feel like that has a lot to do with what we were talking about that small sector, the Romans or whatever. It's so few of them, you know, when you look at the grand scheme of it, you know what I mean? Like in the worldwide context, where even in Rome, like they wanted to be able to control the people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and any leader who was for the people, you best believe they were going to take them out, you know? So,
Yeah.
because they went against
Yeah.
what, you know, what they really wanted. So we can continue to see how fear creates anger, you know, and that
Yeah.
sort of thing, which is kind of interesting, like leading up into this, like this full moon that we were talking about. You know, there's a lot of conflict within it because of all of the emotion or the water, you know, because we're inside of Cancer, and then there's been a Capricorn moon,
Hmm.
where it's going to really cause people to have to go within to find clarity. But people are so influenced by exterior, where, you know, like we were saying, like it causes sensory deprivation. And at that point, when you're just totally confused, that's the easiest way to control somebody, you know, somebody
Yeah.
who doesn't have a mind of their own, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
can't operate from a place of where they have their own clarity about a situation. Then we're going to continue to see more and more protests,
Yeah.
uh, and demonstrations, you know, and, you know, what I also see is like a lot of times, like even the people that are protesting, they don't even really know what they're protesting about sometimes. I mean, you have people
No.
who are really protesting for a reason, but a lot of times people have just taken a side, you know, and
Yeah.
emotionally charged about what it is that's going on because they don't have
Yeah.
an opinion of their own, you know?
It's like these guys in Kenosha, Wisconsin. You know, remember they attacked Kyle Rittenhouse and he
Mm-hmm.
defended himself. It's
Mm-hmm.
like they're just like these three, like those three guys that, you know,
Yep.
they were like these middle class like white kids. They were like dirt bags. Like they
Yep.
wrote the obituary for one. It sounded like he never really done anything.
Yeah.
Like the best they could come up with, and like the little like the news obituary was he loved skateboarding. And it's like, well, that's cool, but like, did
Really?
he have passion? Did he help? Did he like to help people? Was he trying
Right.
to? Who was he trying to serve? How was it? You know what I mean? It was just
Yep.
like
Yep.
they're
It's,
they're
it's
they're, they're like these shit kickers, you know?
yeah, it's empty, you know,
Yeah,
surface level type things. And that's what I mean about people not having their own mind, you know.
yeah. They just would have gone out and protest and broke shit
Yeah.
for any
Yeah.
cause.
Because misery loves company. Um,
Yeah.
oh, and I think because speaking of that, I think Lilith is in like the 12th house.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you know, so I was
No.
like looking at that, I was like, wow. So the whole thing with that mystery behind victims, and then the victim mentality, and then suffering and things like that or whatever. And then also kind of just looking at some of the stuff that has happened like here recently with abortion, you know, people
Oh,
been
yeah.
forced to kind of make some really emotionally charged decisions. You know, well, a lot of people are emotionally charged behind this whole thing, but the fact that the government feels like they can just tell people you have to be this or this, you know what I mean? But then on
Yeah.
the flip side of it, allowing other people to take a hard stance in their beliefs in regard to who they believe they are, regardless of their physical makeup, which is cool, which is fine. You know what I'm saying? Like be who
Yeah.
you want to be and all that. But you see the imbalance, man. I mean, it's just no way to like move away from. You see these imbalances of like it's like where, especially I'm just one, especially with the Democratic Party, man. Just it's just, you know, I can't help it. I can't help it. You just see a lot of the nonsense. Not that, the right is so right, but just like this
Right.
with the Democratic Party, man, it's just like it's crap,
Yeah.
like insane.
Well, they claim to be like all things to all people, and they claim to be like compassionate and nice and about justice and equality, but it's like they thrive on people who are suffering.
Yeah,
And it's like they wouldn't want that to go away. Like, like give you an example. Like I have like a scientist who's one of my patients, and he knew somebody who worked for like what the hell was it, the Forestry Service?
yeah.
And you know how there's the whole gypsy moth thing where they eat the leaves on the trees, and
Uh-huh.
so the guy, this was probably like 30 years ago. The guy was like, we could get rid of gypsy moths in a heartbeat if we wanted to, but then our budget would be fucked, and all the gypsy moth experts wouldn't have work to do. So it's
Crazy.
like the Democratic Party's totally like that, because it's like they don't want to, like, if like people in inner cities, for example, were like
Yeah,
doing well, like what the fuck would they do?
exactly.
Like there'd be no one to pander to.
Exactly. I
Or
mean,
yeah.
I had a conversation with someone a while back. Well, they were asking me, about politics, and I try to stay away from politics with certain people because I can't really have an intellectual conversation without all the emotional charged BS
Yeah.
and rhetoric. And then it's like, yo, like you haven't even like read enough to have this conversation, about the facts. And one of the things that they were talking about, because this was during the elections, right? And I
Oh,
just try to stay away from that whole sort of thing. But
was this in Europe?
no, this was here. This is
Okay.
here. This is here, here in the States.
Oh, right. That's right. That's right. You weren't gone yet.
Yeah. This is here in the States, and they were asking me like, what do I think about like Joe Biden and the vice president, and I was like, I think they're full of shit. Just period. Like I don't have a lot to say. I just think they're full of crap. And
Yeah.
they were asking me why. I was like, I don't want to get into this, but let's just look at some of the things that they're running off of. You know what I mean? The whole piece, and Biden jokingly saying, "Oh, if you don't vote for me, then you're not black."
Yeah. Oh God, that's
I was
like
like,
so demeaning.
really? I was like, and still, let's just look at that just as a person, that just looking at him as a person to feel like he can make that kind of statement. Why would I even deal with a person like that, let alone feel like they were capable of making the best decisions for all parties involved? You know what I'm saying? Like it's not even rocket science for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Along with a lot of the things that I just disagree with in regard to the vice president and just what she stood for. And so then the whole thing came up about like reparations and things like that. And I was just like, look, we live in America, you know what I mean, where most people don't have a real concrete understanding of the history of America.
Yeah.
Because if they're going off what they were taught in K through 12 public school, then they were not taught any of the real truth about how things work and what's really going on.
Yeah.
And the dumber the person is, the easier it is to control them. You know what I mean? Like free thinkers and people who think for themselves, there's going to be more of a balance, but there's going to be a debate. It's going to be a real intellectual debate where you're going to be able to find a middle ground and things. And that's just not the way it is. So when, thank goodness, for the relief of some of the refugees in the Ukraine, saying they got caught up in that whole thing and the bombings and things like that. But when the US decided that they were going to give like truckloads of money to another country, but they won't even do it for, Americans.
Yeah.
So and when they were asked certain questions about helping, Americans, they started laughing about it.
Yeah.
Then, you got to know that it's not really about helping, quote unquote, America. That's not their job. That's not what they're
No.
there for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they got that kind of money to give away. There's tons of situations right here in America that can use that relief. I mean, like our
Okay.
nonprofits across the country are suffering, like
Yeah.
they can't keep up with the changes in the times, you know what I'm saying? Whether it's uh drug addiction, which kind of has like spiraled out of control over the last 30 years or whatever,
Yeah.
or homelessness, or the biggest one to me, I personally feel, is mental health.
Yep.
People across the board in America are suffering, greatly from mental health, depressed, don't know they're depressed, full of anxiety, don't know how to deal with it. And there's no money, no funds, no research, no efforts whatsoever been dedicated to the health of the people here. So it's like it's a joke to me, So so when it comes to that line of politics and that tier of it, it's just kind of like, all right. I mean, I'd rather watch him fall off his bike, honestly,
Oh,
that was
yeah.
more entertaining to me than to like have a conversation in regard to um what, quote unquote, the party stands for, with the slave party anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just, I mean, like, not to say that all Democrats are bad,
Right.
all Republicans are good or whatever the case may be. I think it varies from state to state and
Yep.
precinct to precinct, because it all boils down on the person and what they represent,
Yeah. But it's telling when you see all these new officials and candidates in the Republican Party that are like Latino or African
Yeah,
American. It's like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
it's like Demo- and like Democrats are like, well, they're just so stupid. They don't know what side to be on. And it's like, well, no.
Exactly.
If
It's like
your
a
party was that good, everybody could see that it would be the thing to do. And
Yeah,
they
like
do it.
I actually liked the young lady Kim that was the representative in Baltimore. I think that
Oh yeah.
took a lot of guts. Took a lot of guts to kind of like jump out there and see that, you know, how long has that been like a Democratic, area? But look at Baltimore. Look at Baltimore,
Yeah.
Baltimore's people, haven't had anybody who really was for them in a long time, like
Yeah.
the politicians end up going to prison, you know what I mean? Like when you got the mayor of the city going to prison and the police commissioners going to prison for acts of crime within the city itself.
Yeah. Well, what is it? It's like Baltimore and Philly. It's like every other year, some city official goes to jail for election fraud.
Yeah, election fraud, yeah, or stealing funds of some sort, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then, yeah, give somebody else a try, and I thought that was really commendable of her to kind of like step in there and see if she can make that change. I mean, now I've looked at some of those lines because I was just interested in that sector or whatever. The way the precinct lines are drawn or whatever, as far as like where funding is going in like Baltimore City, is really weird. It's like the whole, honestly, you can see the whole setup from what they call redlining, from like I think what redline is like when the 50s or whatever, where so redlining, more or less general term, redlining is when after segregation kind of was like, dissolving itself or whatever, and you didn't really have segregation between things like where you had like a black town and this and like those sort of things. This is when the highways were developed or the freeway,
Yeah.
because a lot, so like in that area, so you got 301, which is used to be the main highway. But then you got the Beltway now, 95, so 95 just kind of like cracked right down the center a lot of these neighborhoods. And what that actually did
Right.
was it stripped the neighborhood, the communities of their wealth. You couldn't keep it in those communities anymore. You know what I mean? So redlining is a very interesting topic.
Huh.
It's a book Jewish guy wrote. It's called The Color of Law. That talks about redlining during that time period, which gives some very interesting facts, even about like what is it? What county is Oakland in? I forget what county Oakland is,
Oh,
but
geez. In California?
yeah,
Oh,
but it
I
was
don't
talking
remember.
about like how they stripped like a lot of the black communities of like a lot of the resources. So the men had to go like they had to carpool 2 and 3 hours away to go work in like the boat what do you call those? The boat factories or whatever. Uh
Okay.
yeah, to kind of like, so the wealth was kind of like, you know, pocketed in certain counties or whatever, and then other counties and cities were like stripped of all of it. Uh
Huh.
like in Baltimore, it's like Baltimore has more nonprofits than any other city in the
I bet.
country. It's like over 3,000 nonprofits in Baltimore City, right?
Wow.
Which is incredible. But even still, but then like what, 30, 40 minutes down the road, um, Anne Arundel County, super wealthy,
Yeah.
super wealthy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, but the port is in Baltimore City. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the south side of Baltimore mainly is Irish. You know what I mean? Who
Right.
actually work the docks or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah. It was all longshoremen. Yeah.
yeah, but South Baltimore doesn't look like it has any wealth in it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
know, so you
It,
see a lot of these things like that. So when it comes to like, and that's another thing I think that's going to continue to be exposed in this Pluto return over the next 2 years.
yeah. I think indigenous, well, I mean, modern indigenous just sort of
Mhm.
like life is making a comeback.
Right,
Like people are like breaking away from this whole imperial thing and be like, no, we want communities.
exactly.
We want to
Community based,
decide in our local area. It's like I
exactly.
think I think that's why the Mexican border's open and like you mysteriously have people from like Central Africa, West Africa, Middle East, like just appearing in Mexico and crossing the border. And it's like
Mm, wow.
I'm sure like Soros Airlines are running,
Mm,
but I think the Democratic Party and their backers they want new people in here because the people here are just losing so much trust.
yeah, yeah.
So like, get them fresh, get them traumatized, and be like, "We'll give you this, this, and this. Now, just please vote for us."
And you see the same thing in Europe as well too. Like
Big time.
they they're letting a lot of refugees in from other countries or whatever to do a lot of the work because the workforce is slimming, but they're not going to pay them.
Yeah,
They're not gonna really pay them what they deserve. But I think that's going to backfire as well too, because like I said, people are just becoming more and more aware of like how things really work and what's really going on, and then like they're forcing people to become more community based. People who think alike are starting to kind of like really pull together. I mean,
yeah,
what do you expect?
yeah.
Pressure makes diamonds. You know what I'm saying? There's food shortages. You know, like like when it comes to education, people are being forced to find other ways to educate themselves because they've been scared with pandemics. And most parents, if they have children, they don't want their children going somewhere where they don't really know what's going to happen within that. And then teachers are not even getting taken care of. You know what I mean? So I feel like the whole community based effort is kind of like really what's emerging from a lot of this,
Yeah,
where people who think alike are kind of like connecting with each other on and then well slowly, but on an intelligent level, because like right now, like we're still seeing people just emotionally charged, you know what I mean? Where that pressure is going to have to kind of like keep turning up on a lot of things for people to come into a realization as to like, oh, I've been lied to and I really don't know what the heck is really going on. And I need to educate myself, which is why I feel like, it's so important to kind of like, like our generation in particular, to educate the youth in different facets. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
not saying that you got to be doing the same, everybody has to be doing the same thing across the board. But from what I see, the children, they're a lot smarter than, we were in previous generations because they're exposed to a lot more. They have the ability to retain a lot more information, but on some level, their brain works different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Put them on a keyboard, and they can go for it. Give them a pen and a paper, and it's almost like it's the most difficult thing for them to do is just slow their brain down and write things out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and you see that I mean, just speaking on education or whatever, most of the kids in the States, they have them on a Chromebook or something. They have a computer that they take home. You
Yeah.
know, they don't do a lot of writing, unless they're in like a magnet program or private school or some sort of whatever.
Yeah.
They, even the way they teach math is very funky, like one of my mentees, a guy that I mentor, he's seventh grade math teacher, and he was just showing me like far as like when we were coming up, like you know 10 plus 10 is 20, period. It's nothing outside of that. Now they make them count blocks and some shit, and it's a real funky way of doing math. And I was like, what the heck? He's like, well, it's geared towards making sure that the kids on the lower end can figure it out.
Oh,
I was
for
like, so what
fuck's
about
sake.
the kids that are already like at that level and need more? He's like, yeah, that's the problem. So,
Yeah. I've
you know,
heard of kids being told to slow down because they're making other, in blue states, the teachers say you're making your
absolutely,
classmates feel bad about themselves.
absolutely,
It's like, well, tough
absolutely.
shit.
Yeah.
You can't all be
Like,
the champion.
yeah, exactly. And that's that other thing with that about everybody getting a reward, like, in sports and shit, like
Oh
there's going
God.
to be somebody who's better, and you just need to practice. You got to accept that you're not going to be good at everything. you know there's going to be someone
Yeah.
who's better than you at that. You're not on the same level as that person, you know what I mean? That doesn't make you bad or whatever, but that makes you respect that, you know what I'm saying? And I
Yeah.
think that's part of the problem with everybody being so emotionally charged. It's like, well, that's not fair. Well, last time I checked, life really isn't fair. You know what I mean? Like, it,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you want things to be fair on some level, but there has to be a balance with it.
Yeah.
Just speaking on that, there has to be a balance. I feel like the balance has been lost, and there's some of the stuff that I listen to and just witness or whatever, I think is just it's way out of line, man. Like the balance is way out of line when um we start talking about some of these things that they're doing with children and making them make adult decisions about like their body and things like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
yo, like you don't really even know who you are at 18, let alone 5 years old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like I said, like I think that kind of confusion is going to continue to pick up. But I also think this pressure is going to force intellectual thinkers to kind of like collectively come together and decide what they are willing to accept and what they're not going to accept, because we're going to see the fallout of it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're going to continue to see like because there wasn't a decision made in regard to this. This is why this is happening, and I think people will get tired of that and start making some real concrete decisions about, nah, we're done with that.
Yeah.
We're not going to accept that. And vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what World War III is. It's the whole, it's like the psychological struggle about
Definitely
about
psychological
this, or
struggle.
yeah.
Definitely.
Because even a pope said it, more than 10 years ago. He was like, no, there's not, there's some conference, and he said there's going to be no major war. It's going to be all localized, like
Makes
localized
sense,
conflicts.
because they want zombies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the best way to create it is to get your mind. I mean,
Yeah.
no real nutrition with minerals in it. We
Mhm.
know, and then the oxygen's been attacked. I mean, that alone, oxygen and mineral deficiency causes people to be out of their mind, causes them to be
Yeah.
like really jacked up,
Yeah.
so,
You
you
can,
know,
yeah, like here in North Carolina, when you see the people that are still masked up,
yeah,
the eyes are like the size of like tea saucers.
yeah, like, that alone, like, and then the tampering of the air, the metals in the air,
Yeah.
whether they want to say they're not the chemtrails, things like that. So,
Yeah.
so on that side, so oxygen, and then the food has been stripped of minerals, which
Yeah.
is, from what I read, is how essentially you actually create new blood, so.
Yeah.
So, if you have a disease or your body's at disease, and anybody who's been sick, I mean, I've been sick before in my life. Like, man, you're like, I remember, I was just dealing with nerve issues in my face, but I remember like it was very hard to focus, you know, something that I've always been very good at, that's always been there, that's kind of like kept me balanced, like my ability to focus, to pay attention and stay, in a certain lane. But when you're sick and you're in pain and you're missing certain things that you don't know, you kind of feel confused because you don't know what's going on with yourself. So that confusion just causes anxiety, and
Yeah.
anxiety causes, irregular heartbeats, and the irregular heartbeats means that, you're not thinking clearly. And then, so you just see it is psychological, you know what I mean? So even if someone is telling you like, hey, I see where you are, this is what you need to do to get yourself right, you can't even hear them.
No.
You can add, so,
Yeah.
so at that at that level, yeah, I feel like, because of the level of consciousness or inner understanding that we're capable of receiving during this time period, because of the transits that are coming through and the times that we're in. They understand like, yo, gotta attack the food, gotta
Yeah.
keep them sensory, like sensory deprivation, gotta cause that,
Yeah.
and at that point you can pretty much make a person do whatever you want to do, you know what I mean? Because they're going to end, and we haven't even gotten into medication because we don't even know what's in that. That's a whole nother piece to it. But
Ugh.
like I said, I think individuals that of higher consciousness, of a certain intellect, that have their own experiences, I do believe we're becoming more community based. And us becoming more community based, that gives us a sense of like what we had before, which we were talking about in the previous episode about American return, people turning more to their heritage.
Yeah.
Before people were more like a village, you know what I mean? Depending
Yeah.
upon each other, because they kind of understand like you need each other, you know what I mean, to
Yeah.
make the whole thing work, versus this whole individual like individual mindset of like, I don't need anybody, I don't need anything, I can take on the world, this false bravado, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, being this tyrant or whatever, or just being the top or number one or whatever they're looking for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I strongly see, in particular with this full moon, because I've been watching it, well, I cast a chart just to see some of the things that would be in it in this full moon. Um, and it's definitely charged with a lot of water, which, Cancer's water sign, so emotion, you know.
Yeah.
And the reason why that has me very interested, the reason why it's very interesting to me is because I can't remember exactly what I was doing, but so we know that there's water within the atmosphere. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
When we you can pull precipitation out of the air or humidity, you can feel it, or air purifier, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's like all this vapor that's in the air. Whether people want to believe it or not, like we're underwater. So.
Yeah.
Um, So with the moon has an effect on water, high tide, low tide at the ocean. And then in astrology, like when you have certain transits and trines and things like that, it's kind of like chemistry, you know what I mean? It creates these vibrations, these frequencies, these energies. And I feel like the powers that be, they have a very strong understanding of how astrology works. I saw this quote one time, like, all billionaires study astrology,
Yeah.
so I was like, of course they do. You know what I mean? They understand how important this really is. And they
Yeah.
want to make it seem like entertainment to those people who they want to control. So with this particular moon, with it being a super moon and being so close to the earth, and some of these water elements that are involved with Cancer and Mercury, which is communication and technology. I think
Mm.
Mercury's in the 12th house. So dealing with the subconscious mind and things like that. And then Lilith also being there. And I think we have a couple conjunctions as well, too. Some very serious conjunctions that
Yeah.
are within this moon, where I've been looking at the atmosphere, like, okay, see all these political leaders dropping like flies, the protests all over the world about certain things,
Yeah.
and been in charge with those things. But then I'm also looking at the SAR series and how it's fully charged, and when she comes from behind the sun, which usually is around 4th of July or whatever, that whole thing of independence and things like that, or fertility, in
Yeah.
that sense. It causes the monsoons in East Africa that sweep across Africa and usually kind of turn on to storms on the west coast of Africa and then go across the Atlantic. Well, just thinking about a lot of that and just storms in general. How even in sci-fi movies, like there's usually a storm for there to be a portal to open up, to some
Right.
degree. And some of these energies that are coming through that are opening up. And I think like a week ago, CERN was turned back on again.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm just like, okay, well, this is a lot of energy within the atmosphere, whether people know it or not. And what
Yeah.
better way to charge people's emotions with fear than this time period right now, when you have all this access to all of this energy to be able to do so. um so I thought that was very interesting, but the whole water and the atmosphere really blew me away, like years ago when I found out that this astronaut almost drowned in space. And I
Right.
was like, yo, what in the world is that about? So, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was at the academy, they used to do like a big lecture every semester, and it was like the whole student body would attend. And they had this guy who was an alum, probably back from the 60s. and he'd been a SEAL in the Navy, but somehow he'd gotten into NASA.
Uh-huh.
He was like the first SEAL to be an astronaut. He was talking about his career and what NASA was doing. And so this was, I don't know how many years before the shuttle program shut down, but not many.
Mm.
And he was going, yeah, NASA's actually going to make a transition from pilots as astronauts to submariners.
Isn't that something?
And he goes,
something.
Yeah, and he didn't elaborate, but he just said, well, it's because the environment in space is more similar to the depths of the ocean.
Telling us right in our face. And yeah, that's wild. Because if you look at it, a spaceship looks more like a submarine than anything else.
Yeah. Did you ever see that guy, William Tompkins? He was like naval intelligence during World War II.
Yeah.
He's got that really kind of hoarse voice.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was like David Wilcock or if it was like Gaia TV. Oh no, you know what? I think Corey Good was talking to him and they did some animation.
Yeah.
But this William Tompkins was talking about after World War II, they got a bunch of like Nazi alien technology.
Yep.
And they just took the fucking submarines and they were like zero gravity them and like put them out in space.
Yep.
And it was like,
I think because he was talking about something called I saw some of that and he was talking about it was charged with red mercury. Like
yeah, it's like the Nazi bell. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then when it got into the whole Nazi bell, they were talking about implosion for propulsion, you know, and that whole sort of thing. And I think a lot of those experiments were the ones that they went down to like the Arctic, Antarctica or whatever. Like, that part. No, I'm sorry. That was William Byrd.
Yeah.
And he was talking about that. He was William Byrd was a naval admiral, Navy. It was
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
He was a big polar explorer. He was the one who like taught the Germans like in the 1930s how to find the caves in Antarctica and the glaciers.
Yeah, and he was talking about the land beyond the poles, you know. Which brings us back to the whole point, because he was talking about how the land was lush and green and things like that or whatever.
Yeah.
I think he actually, after one of his explorations, he came back and did a interview on like one of the, I'm not even sure if they still have that on YouTube anymore. A lot of that stuff they took down. But he went into like great detail about, because they were asking him about the North Pole. He's like, oh yeah, that's cool, but it's really around the South Pole where things are going to continue to keep up. Okay, here we go.
So I got a question for you, like in the scope of like the whole, like the Moorish world. So when you're talking about the Ottomans, like the Ottoman Turks were basically like, they're from Central Asia and they made their way to Turkey and they sort of like absorbed like the Byzantine Empire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so this is like, do you think that they're almost like Mongolians, like they were like horse people. And then they took on this like Mediterranean kind of Iranian culture.
Yeah.
So they outsourced a lot of stuff. Like a lot of their scholars, I think, were like Syrians. And so you think they basically like kind of outsourced like the Phoenician Navy or whatever? And
absolutely.
So this was like a Phoenician, like, you could go there.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I kind of learned about the Ottoman Empire, that the reason why they were so big and lasted so long is because they were very tolerant of other people's cultures and things like that. Like you were allowed to, you know, practice your own beliefs under their, you know, under that empire or whatever. So, this map here, this is a very interesting map. I forget where exactly I got this one from, but and so I think it's interesting that also that it was dissolved. The Ottoman Empire kind of like fell apart right before
Mm,
World War I,
yeah.
but you never hear anything about the Ottoman Empire associated with World War I. And it
Yeah.
had lasted for like, hundreds of years. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like you hear about like a couple little battles and that's about it.
Exactly. But it played a major part in the shift of like what was going on in the world as a whole for a very long time. And also feel like we're still only scratching the surface of a lot of things because, like I said, I feel like there have been like cataclysmic events where the people that kind of like rewrote history, they had fragments of the truth. They knew about certain parts, but I don't really think they knew. I mean, let's like free energy. We can get into like things like that. Oh, this is a better view right here.
Their resolution.
Yeah.
So yeah, so for people who aren't familiar, this is a map. So basically, like an Ottoman admiral, so Turkish Empire admiral, like in the 1500s, copied this map from an older one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a map. So just through basically using like modern satellites, they figured out that this is an accurate map of Antarctica.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
pretty wild, and it's showing all these different animals here, and
Yeah, like you got animals there, and I've seen a few maps, with the animals and tribes and things like that.
yeah, you get the people down here.
So yeah, you have the people there. So it's like you see that it wasn't always ice. You know what I mean? Like something happened
Yeah,
where it kind of like changed the whole landscape of like the way the world was been. See, the other thing that's interesting for the longest time, uh, so much real estate, but you're not allowed to live there. You got to be a part of like the Antarctica treaty to be able to do research or whatever the case may be in that part of the world. Um, but I'm just
yeah,
looking at like, so you see like these things that look like suns, you know?
yeah. Oh, up here, like
Yeah.
the
So
little
you see
hub.
like
Yeah,
there's like one, two, so it's like a big one there and then a small one there.
yeah.
What it kind of reminds me of is like the sun passing through certain gates. You know what I mean?
Huh. Wow.
And when I was doing some research years ago, just in regard to like geography, and one of the things that they were saying was like the stars aren't really up, but they're out, and there's a certain amount of
Right.
degrees. So the landmass that we're on is here, and then the stars are just a certain amount of degrees higher
Yeah.
than where we are. So they look like they're out in space somewhere. But, like if you look at, let's say, let's just say, what I'm saying, you were in the middle of the country. If you were in the middle of the country, 10 miles out, like if I had all my lights on in my house, all you would be able to see is just a light that could possibly look the same as like something that's a star. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So the whole thing that we're saying was like, like space wasn't up, but space was out. And like through the Arctic was the one of the gates, you know what I'm saying, to these other lands.
Yeah.
The land of like Thor, like Thor Island, Thoth Island. There was another map that I had as well. I think I pulled it up, not sure. Might have sent it to you. But
Let's see what I got. What's it look like?
it was actually kind of like a newspaper article or whatever. And did I send that one to you?
Um.
Probably didn't. Hold on, let me see if I can get it to you. But basically, what the guy was saying was like, where is it? 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 It was a map of the world before Give me 1 second here.
Yeah.
But the access to these other land masses beyond the pole.
Right.
And it was a well-known thing that these other land masses were there. And the way that it has it, you see the NATO symbol, how it's like, a circle, and then you got the earth sitting on this circle or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's pull it up.
Yeah, let's pull it up, and then let's see if I can get this one.
Or is it the UN one with the little globe?
The UN, not
Yeah,
NATO.
yeah. That's a weird, mysterious little symbol.
Okay, this one, yes. All right, so this is the inner. They're saying that this is like, okay, this is where we are. This is like inside the ice wall.
Okay.
And then the one that I'm going to send to you is a map that shows, like, if I can find it, that shows all of the land outside of the ice wall.
Okay. Yeah.
And basically they were just talking about like how Orion's, what is it? Not Orion's, but what's the belt? The Van. Here we go. Yes, this one here. This is a better image. So yeah, they were saying that this is how it was an understanding prior to a certain time that all of these all this other land was out here,
Yeah.
But when we see the spacecraft or whatever, I think you have to hit, what is it, the Van Allen belt or whatever, or like you gotta.
That rings a bell. Yeah.
You have to kind of like with a rocket, you have to go at a certain angle at a certain speed to kind of like break through some of these other frequencies, these other spaces. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a timing thing or whatever, as far as like what we see them trying to go into other spheres or whatever, but we never really hear anything about like these gates at Antarctica, what I'm saying, that allows us to get into like other spaces for good reason. But in Antarctica, they found people, on Google Maps, sometimes they found these trucks down there that are labeled Mars Task Force and stuff like that.
No shit.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. Boom. So let me just forward this to you. This is an old newspaper article. I'm gonna send this one to you.
But yeah, this wouldn't surprise me at all at this point about this map here with these little concentric rings, and these land masses.
Yeah. So what does that say? Sun during time of what we call Atlantis pre-Bible. So, okay, you see the sun out there? So, boom. So that's the other thing I want to talk about. So each realm has their own sun, so to speak. You know what I mean? And you see that here in this photograph, you see like a different sun on different realm, which is why I was like, I don't think the earth is flat and I don't think it's round. I think it has, I don't know, like an egg shape or something. I'm not sure, but
yeah,
like you have access to these different planets within these different realms, and then as things orbit a certain way, then you come back into certain transits. You know what I'm saying? Like some orbits are a lot longer than others. You know what I mean?
Sure. Do you think like in these land masses, like basically the people out there,
yeah, absolutely,
have sort of like threatened the deep state, where it's like, if you fucking come out here,
I think so.
Pay.
I think so. I mean, because I've seen some stuff like in some hardcore I guess you call it like I'm trying to think of the name of some of these publications that I used to subscribe to. I mean, you have to pay for them, but it's like more geopolitical publications or whatever. And they in the publication, like when they put it out, they say we can't confirm or deny any of this information. but a lot of it would have to do with like QAnon and just other stuff that was going on. And in one of these articles, it was just talking about how before um, Donald Trump became president, because they really didn't want him to become the president of the United States, they had went down to Antarctica. It was I forget, one of these astronauts that almost died while he was down there. I forget his name.
Was it one of the old ones?
Yeah.
Wasn't it like Buzz Aldrin they brought down?
Yes, Buzz. It was Buzz, and then it was also a member of the Democratic Party that was
Oh,
down.
Kerry. It was John Kerry. Who was the Secretary of
John
State.
Kerry. Yes. Now John Kerry is in Antarctica, like November the 2nd or whatever. He's like a figurehead for the Democratic Party. Your team's about to play the biggest game of the season, and you're in Antarctica. You know what I'm saying? Which I thought was very weird. But they said that they were down there trying to get permission from quote unquote the watchers.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. And he
yeah.
said that Kerry didn't have permission to be down there, and they were very upset about that he would even come down there and try to
Wow.
influence them. And then like a few days later, there was this massive earthquake in Venezuela. And
Right.
they said that was more or less a warning to let them know, like, don't play with us. Do not play with us. Don't ever come down here again unless you've been given permission to come down. I'm trying to think of the name of the publication, but it was definitely a paid publication. One of my mentors that was an old mentor, he's heavily into energy, mainly oil and coal. And he used to like put me onto a lot of those publications or whatever. You know, in some of these articles that will come out of it or whatever. And that was one that I remember very distinctly. It was like, okay, so like I thought, none of them are really in charge anyway, you know.
Right.
But the public doesn't know that, you know. I think you might have, if you check your email, you might be able to see the newspaper article that
Oh yeah, yeah. Let me see if I can.
that.
So okay, so let's jump a little bit, but like related.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know, I haven't seen that. Um, so with this whole like ET threat,
Yeah.
damn Pentagon's talking about. See, there it is. Okay, yeah, let me just download that and I'll pull that. So, so yeah, Pentagon, CIA, they're having these hearings and they're saying, well, and NASA too, they're like, well, we're going to study these ETs and UFOs because we think there's a credible threat. Now, you put that in mind. I've been having this idea that it's like, well, what if the ETs are like from some other part of our world? Like they're not
Exactly.
traveling like for fucking ever.
They're not.
So are they basically, I'm getting this idea that like
I believe so.
these ETs are getting to the point where they're like, we're tired of you fuckers. Like you're always causing problems.
Yeah.
You think you're smart. You don't know how any of this shit works. We're getting sick of you. So we're gonna like show ourselves to your people and just clean this whole thing. Like, do you think it's going in that direction?
I absolutely do. I absolutely do.
Whoa.
So this is, yeah. So
Wow.
this is an article. I think this guy came out in like the 1920s or whatever. And the
Damn.
world map made is what is it? The world map.
1,000 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the date on that thing? Oh, I can't see
I
that
can't
here.
see it. It's like I think it's like 1887, very early 1900s.
Shit.
Yeah, this is a snapshot I took. Like I said, I had a lot of stuff for years, and I was like, I'm just gonna keep all of it.
This is like,
So it's like Friday, January. I can't read the date on it though. But I'll just see
Yeah,
if I can get you. I'll see if I can get a better like image of this one or
we should
whatever.
we should we should start with this next time we meet up.
All right, cool. That works. That
So
works.
did you ever read A Wizard of Earthsea?
Mm-mm.
It's a book. It was written by like in the 60s or 70s. It was a book about like a wizard and his whole like coming of age story.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a map of this land called Earthsea. It looked a lot like this.
Mm.
You know what?
Mm.
Let me flash to that and then we'll jump back to this.
Okay.
Um,
But yeah, I definitely think there are other beings that are closer to us than what we understand, and it would make sense for them to try to keep things, in a certain perspective because it will affect them as well too. You know, if
yeah.
things got too out of hand here, where somebody decided that they were going to like blow a nuke, you know what I'm saying, just blow stuff up, like it's all connected. So
So
mm-hmm,
this is interesting because this is making me look at the whole Anunnaki story in another light.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So it's like what because they talk about how like the Anunnaki or the whoever the fuck who did the Garden of Eden experiments, they were like fugitives from some other planet.
mm-hmm.
Or if they just came from these outer land masses.
That would
And
make more sense.
they're like, you better stay in there. We're gonna destroy your asses. So then their whole UN symbol is like,
Exactly.
we're the overlords. Fuck you, you know.
Exactly. The fallen angels or whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so many different ways through so many different
Yeah.
literatures that
So
tied together in some sense.
yeah, absolutely. So this is from A Wizard of Earthsea, and this is like the landmass in this fantasy. You know what? Let me save it and we can zoom in more. Earthsea. Yeah, I gotta get the sharing online here. So
That's cool.
okay.
Work that out.
Boom. Yeah.
Oh wow.
So you've got this big inner mass, but then you have all this stuff going on out here.
Right.
And it's like in the book, it's like they just kind of stick to this and a little rim out
Uh-huh.
here.
Uh-huh.
They don't really like to go over here on the right or in the north.
Speak on the outsides. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like real dangerous and
And what's all right, so then which goes to the whole thing of like, okay, I don't know. So I kind of feel like, with some of the stuff that we're digging up, like, right, okay, so boom. All right. So we know the Smithsonian definitely keeps tons of information away from the public, you know what I
oh,
mean?
they're like the FBI. It's like a cover-up organization.
Right. Like completely. Now, so like if we were talking about like Nephilim, right?
Sure.
It would be very easy for something that's that big to be able to make these journeys beyond this space, versus being confined within this little space, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Be able to go into these other spaces or whatever, So I think a lot of it has a lot, especially like it looks almost the same, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
minus a few storms that have broken some things up.
So, do you think in modern times, as like this whole deep state developed modern technology, they started preventing visitation from the outer masses, the outer land masses?
I think
Like,
for a time period,
like once they had like kind of a shoot down or just some
some type of,
capability of doing harm to them.
yeah, I believe something definitely happened along the lines of there being some type of block or some frequency or whatever the case may be that caused things to kind of shift. And because so the reason why I say that, okay, and I think it all has to do with the stars, if we look at where technology was before, just eons ago, if we look at whether we look at the pyramids, we look at free energy, we look at any of that, it's been able to withstand, centuries, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then it seems like people got dumb again, you know, like
Yeah.
it's like a complete reset. Like they don't know anything. Like they're, almost like in a very infinite state. And then we gradually grew out of it again. And now we're moving back into higher realms of consciousness again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, how many times has that been done? I have no idea. But it definitely seems like when we talk about the connection with beings from other spaces, there was some type of block or limitation or something where we weren't able to connect on a certain level. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But because of the transits that we're moving in, it allows for more of that to happen again, or
Yeah.
we're moving into that space or whatever. And it seems like the ones that are in control right now, they don't like that, and the reason why I say that is because when you start to look at a lot of these ancient texts, or even like religious texts or biblical texts or spiritual texts, so we'll just put it that way, they all talk about the end of days, the end of time, the end of an age, you know what I mean, and what's going to
Yeah.
happen. And it seems like, I mean, even for me, I understand Revelations a lot better now than I did when I was young. I mean, that's just maturity, but also it just seems more relevant, to the time period now
Yeah.
than before. And some of these islands that, that's been talked about within the book. Now, there's a certain level of hijack within the literature too. People trying to,
Francis Bacon.
yeah, exactly. But even within that, you can still see a lot of the truth or the hidden mysteries, as they call it, you know,
Mm.
within the text that you can relate to other texts. One of the books that I really like, well, two books that I like that kind of help like tie down some other things for me were the Apocrypha,
Yeah.
which is one of those books that were left out, and then the Book of Enoch, because it really like made sense to me as to how more of the story versus the small fragment I was given and told, no, this is like this, and what you don't understand, don't question, and just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Um, Especially when we started talking about like, so we have this here, right? And we've kind of been talking about like portals and energies and stuff like that. So it kind of like leads me into the whole thing of like parallel dimensions, um, and that we're multi-dimensional beings. And when we get into the science of the mind, how they talk about like consciousness is only like 4% at most. And what we call the subconscious is like 96%,
Yeah.
which most people aren't tapping into. So when we sleep or go into these dreams or whatever, how we awaken to all these other spaces or whatever, you know what I mean? So, I feel like as a whole, all of it has something to do with the transits that we're under, and
Mm.
the bigger planets that are so far out of our orbit still aligning with these. Like, so we go into a Nibiru or Planet X or whatever the case may be, you know what I'm saying? Well, even Pluto, for what we've been kind of like speaking on in the last couple of episodes, is like it took it, 240 years or so for it to make a, full orbit.
Yeah.
So with some of these other planets, what's to say that there's not a planet out there that takes 20,000 years to make an orbit or
Hell yeah.
40,000 years to make an orbit.
Yeah.
Uh, so with that being said, I think that a lot of that has to do with the cosmos are still law. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't change,
Yeah.
in that sense. You know what I mean? It's going to
Yeah.
tell you what's going to happen and when it can happen. And I feel like those
Yeah.
that were of this Piscean age understands that this is the end. There's a shift coming, and
Yeah.
they're looking for a way to continue to hold on to whatever is that they had or thought they had
Yeah.
for long.
They've got this very dark, like Egyptian thing where it was like
Mm-hmm.
just they just want it to be the same all the time and no change. And yeah.
And which is kind of like what virtual reality is. You can stay in that same state, you know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I kind of feel like we're in Sim City a lot, you know, like, or the
Totally.
Oregon Trail, you know, like,
Totally.
like when computers can, like, that's what it kind of seems like what's going on with
Yeah.
what we
Yeah.
call this reality in this space that to the point where it doesn't even make sense anymore. It's like, yo, this game is not working, you know, like not
Yeah.
doing what it's supposed to do, you know, or a glitch, so to
Yeah.
speak, in the matrix.
Totally. Hey, I gotta be somewhere, so let's leave it there, but let's continue with this.
So we'll pick up with the map the next time we get on. I'm trying to see if I can't get a better image. I know I have some more in my archives,
Yeah.
and I should have time to kind of dig through them. So
Cool.
I'll be a lot better prepared for our next session when it comes to the maps and some and the sources where I got them from, in case anybody wants to try to
Cool.
dig into some of the stuff themselves.
Cool. Thanks for meeting up today.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
All right. Thanks. See you later.
All right, peace.
You too.